In Nepal, there's a deep-seated crisis of trust in the state. Now, this isn't just about public opinion. It's a structural problem, a kind of paralysis that's holding back the nation's progress and really shaping the future for millions. Today, we're going to break down exactly how this system works and why it's failing. To really get a sense of the scale here, just look at this number. Up to 68% of the population feels the country is on the wrong track. This isn't just a mood, it's a completely rational response to seeing the political class fail again and again to provide any kind of stability or vision. This widespread disillusionment is really the starting point for our analysis. So we'll look at this in 5 parts. We'll start with the non-stop political turbulence, then the paralysis it causes. From there, we'll dive into the corruption that fuels it all and the justice system that can't seem to stop it. And finally, we'll look at the very real human cost of all this dysfunction. All right, let's get into it. The first piece of this puzzle is what you could call a state of permanent turbulence. It really defines Nepal's entire political landscape. Ever since it became a federal republic back in 2008, the country has just been locked in this cycle of chronic instability. This timeline really just lays out the chaos. On average, the country gets a new prime minister twice a year. It's a total revolving door, where the same few leaders just cycle in and out of power, making any kind of long-term planning or consistent policy totally impossible. And here's the critical point. These constant government shakeups, they're almost never about policy disagreements. No, they're all about backroom power-sharing deals. The main goal of politics has become a fight for control over the state's resources, not actually governing for the public good. Let's move on, because this leads to a really fascinating paradox in Nepalese politics. It's a situation where even having a majority in parliament leads to complete paralysis. We're calling this the tyranny of an unstable majority. See, normally you'd think inaction happens when no one has a majority, but here they have one on paper. The problem is it's so fragile, so cobbled together with transactional deals that for any real practical governance, it's completely useless. And the results of this are pretty severe. You get these huge coalitions that are just poisoned by constant infighting. So what do the governments do? They just bypass parliament altogether, using executive orders to get things done without any debate. And all this chaos at the top just trickles down, destabilizing the provincial governments and proving that the entire system is still captive to the whims of the central elite. Now, this brings us to the real engine driving this whole crisis: systemic corruption. It's not just a side effect of the political instability, it's the root cause, and it's protected by a deep, deep culture of impunity. And the hard data, well, it backs this up completely. If you look at Transparency International's 2023 index, Nepal's ranking in the region is poor. It's lagging behind countries like Bhutan and India, and it's shown basically no real progress for years. A score of 35 out of 100 is a massive red flag. Anything below 50 on this index indicates a serious systemic corruption problem. And Nepal has been stuck right in this range for a very long time, which points to a deep institutional rot. And this isn't some abstract concept. We are talking about massive, jaw-dropping scandals. Everything from defrauding genuine refugees, to grabbing prime government land in the capital, to orchestrating gold smuggling on an industrial scale. These aren't just isolated crimes, they are organized schemes that show a complete fusion of political power and criminal enterprise. And what you get is this self-reinforcing, vicious cycle. It works like this. Political instability means you need fragile alliances to get power. To keep those alliances from falling apart, you have to shield your partners from prosecution. That creates impunity, and that impunity, of course, encourages even more corruption. The profits from that corruption are then funneled right back into the political maneuvering that keeps the whole unstable system going. It just feeds itself. So the obvious question is, if corruption is the engine, why isn't the justice system putting on the brakes? Well, that brings us to our fourth point: a judicial system that's so full of paradoxes that it ultimately fails to hold anyone accountable. At a first glance, things look good. Nepal actually ranks first for rule of law in South Asia. But that number is incredibly deceptive. When you peel back that one layer and look globally, you see it ranks 91st for absence of corruption and a dismal 102nd for civil justice. That high regional rank says a lot more about its neighbors than it does about its own strengths. The real problem here is something you could call fundamental impunity. The system's failure to prosecute the massive human rights violations from the decade-long armed conflict sent a very clear message. If you're powerful enough, you are above the law. Many of today's political leaders have a vested interest in keeping things that way. And look, if a system can't deliver justice for war crimes, how can you expect it to tackle complex, high-level corruption?
So this brings us to our final and, frankly, our most critical point. All these abstract failures, the political instability, the corruption, the weak judiciary, they have a very real and very high price that's being paid every single day by the people of Nepal.
The direct consequence is an economy that's basically stagnant, with a crippling lack of opportunity, especially for young people. The entire economy has become dangerously dependent on money sent home from citizens working abroad. We're talking about remittances making up nearly a quarter of the entire country's GDP. And the sheer scale of this exodus is just staggering. Over 750,000 people officially left to find work overseas in just the last financial year. Let that sink in. That's up to 2,000 young people leaving the country every single day because they can't find a future at home. This has created a phenomenon that we can call the human capital curse. It's a cruel paradox, where a country's main export becomes its own citizens. The money they send home props up the economy, creating this false sense of stability. And that allows the political elite to completely avoid the hard, necessary reforms that would actually create jobs and opportunities inside Nepal. So, in this context, all this migration is so much more than just an economic trend. It's the most powerful, most honest indicator of this crisis of trust. Every single person who buys that one-way ticket is casting a vote of no confidence in the state's ability to provide them with a future. So, to wrap this up, what we're really seeing is a deeply interconnected crisis. It starts with chronic political instability, which opens the door for pervasive corruption and impunity. That's enabled by a compromised judiciary that fails to hold anyone accountable. And the end result? A stagnant economy and a mass exodus of the nation's most valuable asset, its young people. And this all leaves us with a fundamental and incredibly urgent question. Restoring trust means breaking this vicious cycle once and for all. But when a nation's greatest export has become its own future, it forces us to ask, what will it truly take to turn the tide?